Israel was due to release 600 Palestinian hostages and prisoners. However, they didn't. They did not. Benjamin Netanyahu decided that I'm not going to release them. Why, Bibi, you're not going to release them? It's because of the humiliating event that Hamas carries out when they release the Israeli prisoners of war. He's very worried about that event because that event, well, kills billions that Israel spends in what they call the hasbara, or their propaganda, in just a couple of minutes. Hamas just posts a video in a few minutes. They destroy Israel. They destroy their narrative. They destroy everything to do with that state. So Benjamin Netanyahu is upset with that. Last thing he wants is someone going out from his people, kissing a Palestinian resistance fighter, and then calling it whatever they want to call it, right? But problematic for him. But is there another reason for that? There may be another reason for that. And that reason could be linked directly to his allies in the Israeli government. So Axios had this report about this release of Hamas releasing the Israeli prisoners of war and Benjamin Netanyahu refusing to release the Palestinian prisoners. However, they said something very interesting. What they said is that Benjamin Netanyahu took this decision after a second meeting. The first meeting he had was with the security cabinet, with the security services leaders. And according to this report, they made a decision against that. No, they said Netanyahu, they warned him. They said, don't delay the release of the Palestinian prisoners. Why? Because that could lead Hamas to not return the bodies of the Israeli prisoners of war that are due to be released next Saturday. Meaning, Benjamin Netanyahu only sat with his yes men, Smotrich, the finance minister, and then he sat with Ron Dermer, his new poodle, and Israel Katz, another poodle, the defense minister. He only sat with them, and he decided to take that step. So people who aren't really concerned with security whatsoever, and he's going with them. Why? Because they're his yes men. He planted them there. Katz, well, Yoav Gallant was forced to eventually resign. Likewise, with the head of the Mossad, he was put aside, Ron Dermer instead. And of course, now we have a new IDF chief of staff. All of them yes men. So they're not going to challenge Benjamin Netanyahu, which means Benjamin Netanyahu again proves, like he has proven since the beginning of this barbaric genocide against the population, the Palestinian population in Gaza, that he doesn't necessarily consider Israel's strategic security as part of his plans. You're talking about a man who went on a campaign of barbaric bloodlust, pure barbarism, subhuman barbarism, including the mass killing of Israeli prisoners of war inside of Gaza, as evidence revealed since the initial weeks, really, of the ceasefire agreement, of the war in Gaza, the genocide in Gaza. But it's not only Benjamin Netanyahu and the security establishment having these different approaches and views. Because in the beginning, many figures in the Israeli security establishment and intelligence establishment were opposing the war outright, saying it's not good for our people in Gaza, and it's not necessarily a good strategy for us globally, internally. Let's deal with returning those people back, and then we can think of how we get this problem solved, the problem that's called Hamas, that they tried to eliminate multiple times before, and they constantly fail. There was also an article in one of the Israeli Institute, the INSS, Israeli Institute for National Security Studies, National Institute for Security Studies in Israel. And they had a long article during which, study, these people are concerned with security matters, during which they said that, well, the long-awaited victory over Hamas was not achieved. What now? What should we do now? Because we haven't achieved this victory. We've been constantly talking about a victory over Hamas. We didn't achieve it. It did stop there, though. In that article, in that publication, they said Hamas humiliated Israel. Hamas humiliated Israel and caused it a military failure, the likes of which it has not experienced since its founding. You're talking about the INSS from tied with the University of Tel Aviv, saying that. That's not something surprising. 95% of the Israeli population believe that the state of Israel lost, and 5% only believe that Israel won. There's a consensus in Israel. That's why Benjamin Netanyahu is having these moves, of flexing, of aggression, of shows of strength, pathetic signs of victory, trying to have signs of victory, a victory that he hasn't and will never achieve, Benjamin Netanyahu. And that's also running away from the humiliation in Gaza. He's going to Lebanon, going to Syria, threatening other countries too, tensions against Egypt and Jordan and Saudi Arabia. All of that is to run away from the fact that the man was absolutely humiliated and defeated in Gaza and hasn't achieved any of his military objectives inside of Gaza, nor in Lebanon, by the way. So what does that mean? Does that mean that he actually wants to completely ruin everything? Well, we heard signs. There were Hamas figures who said today that there are positive signs from the mediators that before Thursday, things are looking to be resolved. And by then, we are likely, they will probably receive the Palestinian prisoners. They will be released. Meaning, well, Israel and Netanyahu, they're saying things. And on the other hand, they're continuing. The thing that he's trying to do by removing the previous leaders of the negotiating delegation led by the head of the Mossad and the Shin Bet, and potentially sacking them at one point, by the way, because the Shin Bet in Israel started an investigation against close people, close aides to Benjamin Netanyahu and their ties with Qatar and being bribed basically by Qatar. And that bothered Benjamin Netanyahu very much. There's an internal war there that not many people speak about. And he wanted to sack the head of the Shin Bet from a while ago. But it's a clear sign, the fact that he's appointing Dermer to lead the negotiating delegation rather than the ones who have been negotiating for the past 15 months. What kind of sense does that make? Imagine you had someone leading a certain campaign and you found success in having that ceasefire and continuing. Although they could have secured the ceasefire agreement way before, by the way, the delegation, they already agreed, the delegation themselves, they agreed on the terms of Hamas from the beginning of 2024, just several months into the ceasefire, by the way. People need to remember that it's Netanyahu who constantly delayed, and they were criticizing him all the time. Now he's trying to have Ron Dermer so that Ron Dermer can play with the timeline of Benjamin Netanyahu, of course, his yes man / poodle, to do whatever he wants. But there are still progresses. The United States, despite its, wide boy attitude talk, they are still going ahead, and it looks like they do want to de-escalate. All right. This leads us to Yemen. In Yemen, the Pentagon declared that Ansarullah had an escalatory move. What's that escalatory move? A defensive measure that hasn't yet been confirmed by Ansarullah or the Houthis in Yemen. What was it? Well, they shot an F-16 or targeted an F-16 and an MQ-9. They took over a dozen of MQ-9s, by the way, during the genocide in Gaza, because the United States and the United Kingdom, they led the genocide coalition to support Israel, a genocidal entity, against Yemen, for standing up against this genocidal entity, and they were attacking Yemen and the Yemeni people. But now things have quietened down. So why is the United States still there? What's the problem? I thought that the problem was the Red Sea and making sure the trade goes, and although Ansarullah said we're only targeting Israeli-linked ships. And of course, the United States and Britain put themselves in the abhorrent position of protecting a genocidal entity. So they started to face the consequences from Yemen. But a representative from Ansarullah, he responded. He made a response. What did he say? He said, well, firstly, I find it strange that, they're talking about an escalatory move. It's perfectly normal for Yemen to protect its sovereignty and territorial integrity, despite the fact that we still didn't have a confirmation officially from Ansarullah to carry out these defensive measures. So he's finding it bizarre. It's like, what do you mean you're coming to Yemen and you're calling it an escalation when I protect my land? And that's very important, because that's their whole approach. Like Israel itself, they want to portray it in the minds of the people that violence is not problematic when it comes to them. Their use of violence is valid. The use of other people of violence is invalid. It's important for people to understand how they work and how they try to manipulate the people. They don't condemn violence. They don't have a problem with, not just violence, they don't have a problem with mass scale slaughter. They don't have a problem with genocide, mass murder, mass terror, kidnapping, beheading, infanticide. They don't have a problem with that, so long as it's them who are doing it, or their little pathetic genocidal entity in the region representing them. Isn't Israel always saying, we're a representation of, the Western values in the region? We're the only democratic state, and the Western establishments are still supporting it. Therefore, they're collaborating together. So they don't have a problem with any of that. But they have a problem when the victims defend themselves. Oh, then they start to label them, and they can't be there, and no one should challenge us. So the man is raising the most valid point from the beginning. What do you mean escalatory move when I'm defending my airspace? That's Yemeni airspace. Ya Habibi. You don't come to Yemen. Don't attack Yemen. Simple. We're going to defend Yemen. However, what does that indicate? That indicates that the US-British Zionist aggression against Yemen hasn't stopped. As a matter of fact, Britain was carrying out spy missions, reportedly, was reported in declassified, against the resistance during the ceasefire. The United States is leading these aggressions against Yemen now. Why? Well, they have a problem, and that problem is called having a force in Yemen that is able to stand up for us. They don't want someone to stand up for them. And the fact that they stopped now doesn't solve the problem for the militaristic oligarchy of the United States and its proxies across the world. Meaning, well, I need to find a solution for Ansarullah. I need to take them down. How am I going to take them down? I need to keep an eye on them. I need to keep an eye on them during the ceasefire. I need to keep an eye when there is a de-escalation. And by doing that, the United States is proving again its warmongering nature and its contempt for international law, total disregard for other nations as well. And combined, of course, with the aggression against Palestine, Lebanon, and Syria, both US and Israel, primarily, of course, alongside their allies, and the allies, that, don't like to say much, but act very loyal, in a very loyal manner, with them, like Britain, against the people of the region. Okay. They are the main contributors of instability and lack of peace and the spread of terror and violence. Why? Well, the rabid psychopathic dog leading the state of Israel is escalating on so many levels. He's escalating in the West Bank. He just went out of a genocide in Gaza, still breaching that ceasefire in Gaza. 50,000 people were forcibly expelled from their homes in Jenin. That's the West Bank. And guess what? Israel is telling them is you're not going to return within a year, at least. They're occupying points in Lebanon. They're saying we're not going to withdraw because we need to make sure that everything is enforced. They're occupying parts of Syria. And now they're saying, oh no, Syria, they shouldn't even have military presence in South Syria. And we're going to stay here for an undisclosed period of time. Why are they doing that? They're doing that for two reasons. Number one, to cover up, again, the military humiliation and failure against the Palestinian resistance. That's number one. Number two, it's a continuation of their true nature. A neo-colonialist, supremacist, violent entity of terror, imposing its will on everyone in the region. A very extremist, racist, violent minority planted by Western powers, imposing its will through mass terror against the people of the region. That is Israel. This is how it was founded. And that's problematic. Now, the question is, if the United States is indeed looking towards de-escalation, because there are contradicting signs, and you need to try and read between the lines to understand, where things could go. The United States, on one hand, if we talk about Syria, well, Trump, before his abhorrent statements about Gaza, although he already made U-turns, he said, I want to be, written down in history as a peacemaker. He's withdrawing from Syria. Okay. Israel is complaining. Why are you withdrawing from Syria? What do you mean withdraw from Syria? We thought we have a deal here. We have the SDF, the biggest chunk of Syria in the northeast. You need to stay there. We need to build a coalition with them. And they complain to the United States. So they're withdrawing and they're supporting a ceasefire. But they're having statements far, far more different than the actions on the ground. Iran took down one of their UAVs several weeks back, and they didn't respond. They didn't even report it. They didn't confirm that it was taken down. Again, showing weakness against Iran. But in the media, it's all, oh yeah, they can't, and we will, and they will leave Gaza, and we're going to control. Contradictions. That could be interpreted as the United States trying its luck with Israel. Israel is the barking dog, and they bark and they try their luck. If it works, good. If it doesn't work, we'll concede. Have we seen that in the past 16 months? Of course we've seen that. Guess what? We've seen that in the fact that Benjamin Netanyahu went into a ceasefire agreement. Phase 1, phase 2, temporary, not temporary, although we're talking about a ceasefire, by the way, agreement that has phases and includes clauses to extend phase 1 if no agreement has been reached on phase 2. So we're looking about a solid agreement. Otherwise, the Palestinian resistance wouldn't have gone into it. But he went against everything that he said from the beginning. No talks with Hamas until we eliminate them. They have two options, either submit or die. We need to eliminate the threat from Gaza and return everyone. Without talking, without anything. He was like, Hamas, you need to, with the military pressure, with the genocide. He went against all of that into a ceasefire agreement. In Lebanon, he didn't achieve his only military objective of the war, which is returning the Israelis back to the north. The mayors of the northern settlements in Israel are opposing the prime minister outright, saying, no, don't return because it's still not safe. How far will they try to do that? And will there be a prospect of things getting out of hand? I'll start with the second question. Yes, there is a big prospect of things getting out of hand, because no one should live with a psychopathic entity committing a genocide and the worst barbaric crimes in history. But the timing and how long it could stretch, this is where things get interesting. Israel's main aim is to recover from the damage, from the massive blow that it got to its image. This military might, this superior country with these superior people in the region, dictating everything that happens and doing whatever they want and imposing their will, first and foremost on the Palestinian people. They were beaten by Gaza. They need to have a big act, a big show to prove people wrong. They need to have these moves, whether they're temporary or not. Temporary or not, we'll try our luck, like they tried their luck with Sinai, like they tried their luck with South Lebanon, like they constantly try their luck. A thief always tries to steal more. If he succeeds, great. If he doesn't succeed, he takes a step back. So at the moment, the situation is quite volatile. It's a dangerous situation. However, on the ground, things are still moving. Now, the fact that there was a confirmation from the Palestinian side, because a lot of things depend on the war with Gaza, on if things escalate or not. The fact that there were statements that are saying that there were positive signs, the fact that we've been here before and we passed things like that before, indicate that it's going to continue. For example, Israel is now delaying the release of these 600 Palestinians. They previously delayed the people from going back to the north. They delayed the implementation of the ceasefire. They delayed the release of Palestinian prisoners before. They delayed aid getting in. They did not comply with many of the ceasefire agreement clauses or humanitarian clauses. But things moved forward. These are indications that, okay, there could be an actual solution. And after things settle slightly and Israel tries to regain or believes that it actually did regain its image as a country that is both legit and powerful in the region, they can start conceding, start to kind of withdraw from certain parts in the area.